Good afternoon. And Gary, I think I have the title of standing between us and the bar.
I think I'm standing between you and the clicker.
All right. If you're a better technologist than I am, maybe you can just click for me. I'll take you through very quickly some of our perspective on the marketplace, and I think some of the things you've heard have come up during the day. So maybe some fine points on some of the things and some maybe takeaways hopefully have some value. So first of all, we talked about the 7 characteristics of the smart grid. This was defined by the U.S. Department of Energy in June of 2008, laying out some of the key characteristics that we're looking for in the smart grid, and so some of the things that we need to achieve and some of the goals. As was mentioned, I've been around technology and technology transformation for a very long time, probably longer than I like to think about, in the financial industry, in the insurance industry, and in the telecommunications industry. And fundamentally, you know, what we do is not overly hard, and this is one of the things that becomes a point for us, but the way that we need to do it is, and I think this comes back to something that Eric was saying. And it's a challenge for us when we talk to people about doing smart metering and doing devices on distribution lines who do traditional IT and communications, who have lots of money and short cycles to deal with. So we deal in a different world when we're talking about doing things on the smart grid. So first of all, it does need to be environmentally ruggedized. It needs to be field hardened to military specification. Should I get it? It needs to be easily deployed and maintained. Absolutely low or no O&M. And oh, by the way, if we can do it in lights out operation so nobody has to worry about it, that would be a great thing. It has to be low cost and high quality, a real driver for us. And when we talk low cost and high quality, we're talking about 20-year life cycles, 30-year life cycles, annual failure rates of less than 0.3% for tens of millions of units devices out there online. And needs to be justified by today's hard costs. Don't talk to me about soft costs. Don't talk to me about the way we may run our business tomorrow. It has to be justified on today's hard costs. So real critical aspects for us. And it needs to be future-proof. By the way, I'd like it to be capable of doing everything I never thought about. And God forbid that we ever have a stranded asset at the end of the day. So make sure that it doesn't change, that it's still good when the business model changes to something we haven't thought about doing. And it needs to be low risk, meaning the utility environment and the structure of what we deal in today provides very little opportunity for forward investment through used and useful rules that we have to work with today. So we need to think about some of these things. Doing what we need to do, we can do. Technology exists. We've done it for our commercial industrial customers for a long, long time. We've done it for our large commercial customers for a long, long time. Bringing this out into the mass market and out into mass deployment is a real challenge for us when you live in the world that we live in. So we do have options. We can continue down the path that we've been for a long time and look for the silver bullet. I think somebody mentioned today, try and figure it all out and get it all right before we head out. We can certainly talk about blowing it up and starting all over again. We may get to that point whether we like it or not if we wait long enough, by the way. Bob Metcalf was quoted here today, and I was in that. But there is that silver buckshot out there. There are those nuggets, those little pieces that we do have that are right in front of us that are very demonstrable. Technologies that are maturing and are out there and available that we can begin the process with. And so I think we need to focus on those. So let's talk about AMI metering, and that's come up in a number of different places today. So I want to kind of frame this off for you and unpack it a little bit, if you will. And so I think what we're trying to really accomplish is the smart energy economy. So we're really transforming the way we think about energy. And when I take those 7 characteristics that were laid out by the Department of Energy, they boil down to 3 key objectives to me. And those 3 key objectives are very plain, and I think they underlie a lot of what we're trying to accomplish. First, we want customer participation in managing their energy and in their usage and conservation. We want mission-critical operations for reliable and flexible energy delivery. And ultimately, we want diversity of supply to achieve energy independence. So to me, those are the goals. That's what we need to accomplish. In order to do that, we have to work with the smart utility, enabling the smart grid for operations, and we have to work with the smart customer, enabling the smart home to be able to participate. Underlying all of those, and we talked about it, it was a quote that I think Dan put up this morning, which I didn't pick up immediately, but if we can't measure it, we can't manage it. And so the metering and the understanding of what's going on, and there has been a lot of discussion about if we build a smart grid, do we really need smart metering? Well, I would submit, if we don't know what's going on, I'm not sure what it is that we're controlling and what it is that we're trying to manage. So AMI and AMI metering, I think, is fundamental to what we need to achieve in the smart grid. So we talk about the smart grid. I think I have a little different perspective in that the smart grid is not necessarily a network with respect, but is in fact a set of applications. And those set of applications have very specific technology drivers behind them. At a very broad set, those technology applications are what we used to call AMR, which are the utility-specific operational benefits that are out there, extending out to AMI that begin to enter into the home and add customer benefit, advanced distribution operations beyond what we knew distribution automation to be for years, and then advanced transmission operations, those things that will take us to the points of generation. And so that bundle of applications, and as we look down and segment those and look further into them, provide real value, especially when we look at them as individual contributors. So what is AMI and what is the advanced metering infrastructure? We seem to have lost the acronym in all of this. And so let me just step back and put a little bit of definition around that to Itron. And it's the architecture that provides the infrastructure to support two fundamental smart grid applications. And those two fundamental smart grid applications are smart metering, so that we can accomplish complex metering and introduce new rates and new products, and it's home energy automation, so that we can enable demand response and conservation. Those are the two key objectives of what AMI delivers to us. Those applications define two unique technology requirements. I think Eric made mention of at least one of them earlier, in that we need to extend this network out into every premise that potentially is tens of millions of points. And both cost and longevity is absolutely key to what we do. Cost of access are major issues. Lifetime is greater than 20 years. And oh, by the way, please give it to me for less than $80 to $100 per point. But can't we do more with it? So once we have the AMI network in place, once we have that infrastructure in place, please, can't we do more with it? How do we leverage that asset? I think the answer is yes. We can do more with it. But I don't think that we need to fool ourselves into thinking that the AMI infrastructure is going to be the smart grid network, the absolute panacea of everything that we want to accomplish. The AMI network and the smart grid that it represents will not provide mobile data computing. It will not provide streaming RTU data. It will not provide sub-second, sub-cycle latencies. It will not be deterministic demand and control. You don't get that for $80 to $100 per point. So what I would submit is that instead the smart grid is in fact a multi-tiered network of networks. And those tiers need to interact and provide appropriate communications to meet the variety of application and data requirements that they need to support. And each one of those layers needs to be looked at independently with key considerations. Those considerations include availability and reliability, the latency and the throughput for that particular application, and the cost and longevity. Those things will determine the technologies that you need to have underlying the application. They'll determine the place in the architecture where they need to reside. They'll ultimately define the amount of money and the cost recovery that needs to be allocated. So we talked about the role of technology, and I would submit that technology is one of 5 critical areas that we need to think about. Unfortunately, we tend to focus on technology because we happen to be an engineering culture. The other ones that need to be looked at diligently are defining the objectives and revisiting the targets that we're looking to achieve. I think Gary mentioned a little bit earlier. Absolutely critical that we have stakeholder education and make sure that when we build it, they will come. We need to understand the economic and risk model that we're operating under and how it needs to change as we go forward. Yes, technology set and desired functionality is important. And as important is what is the deployment and how are we going to maintain the technology over its life cycle. So in today's world, all of these things move at alarming rates. They don't all move together. And if we try and put them in a box and try to manage them, we probably will not get very, very far. So therefore, I would submit that we need to pursue them independently based upon the application set that we're trying to accomplish in our particular operating environment. So that includes AMI, advanced distribution operations, or advanced transmission operations. Technology will advance. And I would use by way of example for my utility customers and colleagues here, Itron today has a vast amount of radio modules out in meters. You're all familiar with them. They've been around a long time. They've served a very good purpose. I would guarantee you, at least 3 martinis, that not one of you understand that there are 5 generations of technology that are sitting out in the radio modules that we have over 40 million of deployed across North America. 5 generations of technology, and yet the billing systems that they provide and the way they interact with the business operations is completely transparent to every utility where they've been implemented. So if we focus on the application and we focus on the architecture and assume the transition will occur, then we can do it seamlessly. We have to work with what we have today to solve the immediate problems that we have. We have to understand that the implementation will likely be evolutionary and not revolutionary. It's not likely we're going to blow it up. And that, in fact, the functional applications will be incremental and that we'll continue to build on what we have. It infers a risk and longevity assumption which is far different than we have in today's model. We have to look at what are the risks that we're looking for the utilities to take on, how are we willing to compensate them and the other stakeholders that are involved, and what are the longevities in terms of the technology life cycles that we're looking to accomplish. Can the assets work as long as we're looking for them to work? And key, and again mentioned, interoperability and transportability, absolutely, absolutely key. No single vendor can deliver the entire solution. We have to figure out a way to promote an innovative ecosystem of solutions that operate together. And we have to come to a world where we can go through technology refreshes far less painfully than we have to deal with today. Open standards are extremely important. They're extremely important in order to create the ecosystem that we all hope to accomplish. What's key is that we not only have connectivity, but we also have communications. That we have an environment where the applications can interoperate together, where data can be exchanged, and where technology platforms underneath can be seamlessly replaced. However, open standards also represent a significant challenge. We talked a lot about security, making sure that we have secure systems when we have multiple users and multiple access points, and technology is moving in and out all the time. We also have to worry about network management. When we have a multi-purpose, multi-access system, we have to talk about traffic control, prioritization. What do we do when the system goes down? How do we notify all of the constituents of the system? Extremely important. So let's not forget about network management on top of the technology. So in summary, remember, what we do is really not very hard. Anybody who's been around technology for a long time, given enough money, we can do it. We've done it in the Internet. Now, just as an aside, we use the Internet as an example of what we'd like to do in the Internet. But I would remind everybody that the Internet is now over 30 years old. It's taken us 30 years to get here. I'm not sure we have 30 years to go. We've done it in consumer electronics. Consumer electronics have a typical life cycle of about 3 years. They're disposable, very inexpensive. And by the way, if I drop my cell phone, I'd probably just go out and buy a new one. We've done it in financial and telecommunication industries, where we have a lot more money and a lot less time to worry about. Commercial industrial energy management systems as well. However, we continue to struggle on how we do these things on key critical infrastructure systems, and that's really the challenge that we have in front of us. We have, as a country, as a nation, had difficulty doing it in our transportation environment, our medical environment, and yes, also our energy environment. The challenge is the way we need to do it. And again, I'd hold up environmentally ruggedized, easily deployed and maintained, low cost, high quality, future-proofed, low risk. Take any one of those away, I'm sure my colleagues would agree, be more than happy to take on the challenge. Thank you very much.